Welcome, Dr. James Beckett, Sports Card Insights episode about Rickey Henderson, who's passed away. A tribute to him. I did not know him. He's a little bit younger than me. It's always really sad when anybody dies, but when they're younger than me, that really puts things in perspective. So a great player, a lot of confidence in himself, but he really backed it up. Thanks, sponsors. Beckett Media, Beckett Grading, Beckett Authentication, ComC.com, Burbank Sports Cards, Mike Stadium Sports Cards, Heritage Auctions, Huggins & Scott Auctions, Topps, Upper Deck, and Panini. Rickey, I think, was going to be 66. One of the ways I do ages, just to get Sports Card Insight, is if you know his rookie cards in 1980 and you just roughly subtract 22. The other rule I have is if you know what year somebody started collecting cards, you subtract 8, and then you find out how old they are, approximating. In fact, he was going to be 66 on Christmas Day, sharing a birthday with my sister, not the exact year, but I have a younger sister who's probably was a couple years older than Rickey. An amazing guy. In fact, Phil Pierce was contacting me and Rich and talking about that. Now he was in the consideration of the greatest living ball player. And he said, does that bring Bonds or Griffey? And I had mentioned Koufax because I always look at who's the oldest guy. And it was Willie Mays when he was still alive. And Bonds, if it's the greatest living player, not the greatest living person that played baseball, I think Barry Bonds is worthy of a lot of consideration, just on the stats as a player. I think people have always thought that his stolen base record was unbreakable as part of his mystique. But now with the recent rule changes, it's possible. On the other hand, somebody would have to play for 20 years and steal 70 bases a year. 70 bases is still a lot. One other hobby visibility issue that Rickey Henderson has is he came up importantly in the conversation about when the vintage era starts or stops. As I made a decision, somebody had to make a decision. It was chaos out there. But vintage, when we started BVG back in the late 90s, we said vintage is going to be anything before 1980. Now, there was a lot of discussion about what about 1980 or before, because Rickey Henderson is right on the border. In fact, Phil Pierce was saying he thinks that Rickey Henderson is the last great vintage card. Again, according to my definition, Phil, he's the first great modern card because the 79-80 Gretzky is vintage. Anything that the next year would not be. So we drew the line after the decade of the 70s. And when we did that, it was about 20 years before. Made a lot of sense. I'm not in favor of a moving target, but I see what people are saying. Because Rickey was the only really significant rookie card in 1980. That was a big deal. And if you go to 81, you've got 81 Donruss and 81 Fleer, which no way in the 90s were those considered vintage. They were not well received, and they were more modern and mass-produced. And so that was a reason for stopping in 80 or 79. We chose 79. The advanced metrics that are talked about now, they weren't really considered. They weren't invented, I think, back when Rickey was playing in his early days. But getting hits, getting singles, or home runs are good too. He had the most leadoff home runs, but you've got to get on base in order to get steals. And so he walked a lot, but also had a lot of hits too. So mainly it was on base. So he's accumulating bases, scoring lots of runs. And knew something happened when I got a lot of sales or offers on ComC for my Henderson cards. And I just wonder, why are people making offers when somebody dies? Because that's just begging me to increase the price. I don't normally do that, but if I haven't raised the price and somebody's trying to buy it from me and then mark it up and sell it to somebody else, I don't like that. So don't make an offer, just pull the trigger. And a bunch of people did. So it just depends on how I feel about that. But we had some autograph Rickeys, and I think they're all sold. I'm trying to figure out, I looked at all the trades that Rickey was involved in, and some of them he was signed to free agent or signed by teams. He was on 9 teams in 25 years. But it must have been that after the first 15 years or so that people just were disrespecting him. Every trade, you just look at what Rickey was traded for, and Rickey, it would be a dominant trade. Whoever got Rickey, it was terrific. So somebody must have been disrespecting him, because there's a thought that when somebody gets past 35 or so, they're going to be slowing down. Rickey's game was mainly based on speed. That's part of the allure of Luka as opposed to Tyrese Halliburton. Tyrese Halliburton doing it by speed. Luka doing it based not on speed, but on guile and court savvy. I think Rickey probably had both, but he did not slow down I'm sure he slowed down a little bit, but not enough. He was still stealing bases in his late 30s and early 40s. Remember his batting stance. I crouched a little bit. Of course, he was a bats right, throws left, which is more unusual. I was bats left, throws left. And you just think he did what a lot of people do. When you've got 3 balls in the count or the count is favorable to you, you go into a deeper crouch because a walk is as good of a hit, especially for somebody stealing like he did. And frankly, once he stole second, I'm told by my friends that played in higher leagues, the major leagues, et cetera, that stealing third sometimes, based on the circumstances, is easier than second. You can see it all in front of you, same distance, but you can sometimes get a bigger lead and get a running start, and you can time the motion better. And with a right-hand batter in the box, the catcher's got to do a workaround. Again, I did sell some Rickey Hendersons immediately after it happened. His better inserts and parallels have always sold well for me regardless. Now they're gone. I think I don't have a lot. I have cards that I have, and once they're gone, I don't have that much stock to replenish. When I was playing fast pitch softball, I was a leadoff hitter, and my manager, the other players, they always wanted me to take some pitches so I could figure out what the pitcher's throwing if it was a new pitcher. I hated that. I just wanted to hit the ball. I wanted to hit the first good pitch. And they didn't like that, but I think that's what Rickey did. He's up there. He'd like to get a walk, but the first good pitch that comes in, he's going to take a rip at it. And he's the big leader in, game open, home runs from the leadoff position. They'd ask me, what was he throwing? I don't know, but I hit it right at somebody. And I didn't know. I was just concentrating on trying to hit the ball. He was the MVP in 1990. And again, the sports card insight there is, and I've heard this discussed, is that if you wanted to commemorate that, do you get his 1990 card or do you get his 1991 card that mentions that he got it? I think you get the year that it happened because that's the year you didn't know it was going to happen. You saved it up, and that was the year he did it. The other thing that gets discussed a lot, Tanner Jones said this with his Canseco. He wasn't going to get Brad Askew with Eddie Murray. They're focusing more on cards in the players' playing days. But I think with Rickey, and the way I would look at it, and this happens with Michael Jordan too, is that I'm interested in cards from his best playing days. In other words, the years and on the teams that he is most closely identified with, which I've always think of him as Oakland Athletic, Oakland A. But then I certainly remember him on the Yankees, and then he had a whole bunch of short-term things as he aged. But I want to commemorate people in their prime. The cards hobby is a visual representation of something that was going on, and I like that. 25 seasons, I've talked about it. You could have some excellent years, less excellent years, but he had really good years, and not 25 great years, but he probably had 20 where he was very productive, so much so that his steals record, 50% ahead of Brock, who's in second, and was also a great base steal and a great player and a Hall of Famer as well. I don't think there'll be another one. Part of Rickey was his personality, which was full, not the way I am, but the way a lot of people are. He wanted to be noticed. I don't know. He was the only one that said that, but it's not bragging if you can back it up. And he came to play. In fact, the reason you play that long is because you love the game. And the reason I'm hanging in there after I've been in the hobby more than 25 seasons is because I love it. I love the hobby. Rickey loved baseball. He loved playing so much so that he played an independent league. He just loved to play. And just like when I was a kid, we played. Nobody paid us to play. We just went to the playground. We chose up teams. And we went out there and played and came home when it was dinner time. So anyway, thanks everybody. Great memories with Rickey Henderson. It's sad to be thinking about his passing. Condolences to his family and friends. But we have the memory of a great player who was one of a kind. So thanks and see you next time.